RealTuners Radio.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RealTuners Radio, episode number 30. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we don't have a special guest, so we've decided just to take questions from the audience for 2 hours. With our usual panel of hosts, including but not limited to Chris Delgado from ProSpeed, John Bewley from Little John's Motorsport Solutions, Chad Spire from Spire Racing Heads, Tom Sewell from Fuel Injector Development, James Short from Shore Tuning, Mark Dahlquist from Throttles Performance, Bill Fowler from Bear Brakes, Doug and Andy Cook from Motion Raceworks, Scott Evans with Evans Tuning, and the guy we aren't sure how he got in here, Rye Klemp from Bull City Speed. Are you interested in taking a live in-person class with RealTuners? We actually give live 2-day courses in dyno shops across the country. Our first class of 2018 will be in Houston, Texas on January 20th and 21st. For more info or to make a reservation, go to realtuners.com or message us at RealTuners LLC on Facebook. Learn how to tune your own standalone EFI system like Holley, Big Stuff 3, Megasquirt, and Microsquirt on the chassis dyno. Includes topics such as traction control, individual cylinder tuning on a budget, and power adders, all designed to help you get your project running successfully in a class taught by people who actually do this sort of thing for a living. Good evening, everybody. What's going on? It is January 10th, 2018, and here we are. Wednesday night, of course, 8 o'clock p.m. Central, RealTuners. Check us out at realtuners.com. You would think I'd be more prepared for these things after 30 episodes. We've been doing this for over half a year now. Anyway, we're still here, so that's cool. So check it out. We've added classes. The live classes are surprisingly, they're selling pretty quick. So we added another one at Tick Performance in Mount Airy, North Carolina. And that is going to be February 24th and 25th. They're right there on the state line there. But anyway, so that's going to be a Holley-specific class, Holley EFI Essentials. So let's see. Without further ado, Rye, what's going on, man? Anything new happen this week?
Well, I sold a car.
The Bronco sold.
Yes, Rusty Wallace, a.k.a. Matt LeBronc, a.k.a. Bronchitis, is...
Jesus Christ.
Brad wants to punch you in the mouth right now.
No longer with...
I hate people who name their engines and their cars. Ryan called his 3 names.
Yeah. My Rusty Bronco, which was trying to return to the earth, has moved on to a new owner, and... he's a very young kid, and he is stoked on it, and he gave me a lot of money for it, which I was not expecting. So it's been a good week. Here. And I am stoked now that I hear that you're going to be in Mount Airy, even though it's going to be a Holley class. I will be finally able to meet you face to face.
Sweet. Yeah, you come on down to that. Come on down to that. That's a good time. How far away is that from where you live?
Clear across the state, but it's only like 4 hours.
Not so bad.
No.
Very good. Yeah, I'll look forward to hanging out there for sure. That at Jonathan Atkins' class is going to be, I can tell it's going to be pretty awesome already because like 8 people signed up. We announced it like he made a Facebook post like 45 minutes ago, and all those bings you're hearing are my emails, notifications that I got to contact each of these guys. Anyway, so looking forward to that. That's going to be a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually do want to learn the Holley stuff too, so I'm pretty stoked on that. It'll be cool to pick that up a little bit.
It all applies across the board. It really does. Literally, the tool you're using, like Bewley was talking about the other night. I try to relate this stuff from the engine's perspective, what it wants. I talk a little bit about what the carburetor did so well. You know what I mean? And then you're really just shooting for what the carburetor can do, and then from there it's home. Easy. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter what tool you're using. This class coming up in 2 weeks in Houston. There's some seats left for that too. I have 5 seats left, I think. The Chris Delgado is going to take us to the track Saturday night. So you guys coming to the Houston class, have Saturday night open. They're actually doing, I think there's a race Saturday night. He's got a Motec, very well-equipped Motec car out there that we want to capture some data off of and look at the next day. It'll give you an idea of what like the, really high-end teams and stuff, the kind of stuff that's coming down the road for us lower budget guys. That's going to be pretty cool too. But anyway.
Is it going to be the 240 or
I think, is it White Rice that they're taking out, or is it going to be... I'm not sure what he's taking out, Tom. You tell me.
Yeah, it'll be the 240. That's what he's been doing the Motec drag pack on.
Got it. Okay, yeah.
Got it on another car.
Yeah, he's got it on a couple cars.
Does he?
Get louder, Tom. You're quiet. See, I threw off the rhythm there. Sorry. I was just telling Tom to turn it up.
My bad.
Yeah, no worries. Anyway, so I'm not sure what it is, but I know that he's got like 400 plus channels. I just wrote an article on that new drag package that he's not on here. He's babysitting kids. But I wrote an article that's going to be out in 2 months in what magazine? Fastest Streetcar or Race Pages? I think it's going to be. I think it's Fastest Streetcar. It's the data logging column. Anyway,
it'll be Fastest Streetcar because that is the only publication now. They've merged them.
Oh, that is it. Okay. Well, yeah, the bosses didn't tell me that. I'm contract help.
For those of us who don't know, like the only time I ever see that magazine is when I go to a speed shop and they have a bunch of free copies sitting around. How do you get that magazine?
I think you got to be an NMCA member, but I think you can also subscribe to it. You can get it digital online. You can actually go see it digital online too.
You can get it online for free.
I'm pretty sure because they always send me links when I've done 4 or 5 articles for them now, and they send me links when it's out there of the, and they post links on Facebook. And the one I had was a turn the page thing. I could be wrong. And Mike Galimi is probably listening to this going, Clark, you're an idiot. Shut up. I'm the contract help. I'm sorry. But all I know is I generate text and pictures. And we did an article. Delgado opened up the 400 plus channel Motec setup, which, part of that is inputs and part of that is calculated channels and different math he's doing. Some really cool stuff. So that, as far as the advanced topics on Sunday, got that in the bag. But go to the track Saturday night and watch them blow shit up. And then it's not a mandatory thing Saturday night, but it'll just be fun. And with the data we look at the next day will be huge. But so anyway, that's the classes are, check it out, realtuners.com. You can click on live EFI tuning classes, and those you see the schedule there. They've got 8 classes set up for the first quarter of the year so far right now. Let me just whip to these. What do we got? So we got KP Racing in Houston, Texas on January 20th. That's a general essentials class, just covers all standalones. Another one of those at Trick Pro Motorsports 2 weeks later, February 3rd. That's in Palm Bay, Florida. Did you get that one cleared out, Bewley?
Yeah, sorry about that.
It sounded like that one had you invested in that, and that sounded like it produced. But anyway, I'm on.
Dude, I was actually just trying to breathe, and like my sinuses collapsed.
Did that on its own?
Noise. Yeah, it really.
Somebody get him a CPAP machine. All right, so
some oxygen would be great at this point in time.
Right, I'm drinking the single barrel select again tonight. We're finishing with that bottle tonight.
I opened a new bottle for tonight. I opened. Since we're going to talk about bottles, let's talk about bottles.
Go ahead.
So you're going to finish off the
single
Jack
barrel
Daniel's
select.
Single barrel select.
Yes.
Yeah,
doing it at room temperature again tonight. It's really good, man.
Yeah, man. I tell you, it's hard to beat something that'll go.
It's also hard
smooth
to wake
and
up,
drink neat.
The next day was bad news. I took a week off from this, but I think I told you that story. I woke up with the dog's blanket off of his bed. I woke up at like 9 in the morning on the couch with the dog's blanket on me. The dog standing up, just looking at my face, and I think he stood there like 4 or 5 hours most of the night. And I don't know. There was some other stuff. I don't normally drink much, so I don't have much experience with that stuff. But here we go. That was kind of funny. But anyway, what are you drinking? Yeah. You got something special.
I got Jonathan Coleman, one buddy of mine's down at DBR
guys. Oh yeah, they've been in my class. Yep.
Yeah, we're going to do a class with them next year as well.
Excellent.
We're going to put a class on down there. And he sent me a bottle as a gift. I got a hand-selected barrel of George Dickel Sour Mash whiskey, Tennessee whiskey. Yeah,
it just sounds good.
Love the way you say that word.
Yeah, I know you do. And this is some 9-year aged stuff. It's pretty smooth. It's drinkable at room temperature. It doesn't have that bite like a lot of that stuff does when it's neat, when you drink it neat. It's really good stuff. I'm enjoying it. It could get interesting by the time the night's over. It tastes really, really good.
So what you're saying is to get on your good side, we need to send you a good bottle of whiskey.
Man, a good bottle of whiskey never fails to put me in a good mood. So, that's always shit, that gets always bonus point. How can you not give bonus points for a good bottle of whiskey?
Hey, one of my favorite shows is Moonshiners. I love that show.
That's right.
Oh, what's that one? The weird, the most popular dude's name, the little guy.
Tickle.
Let's get him on the podcast. That'd actually be kind of cool, wouldn't it? I mean, we might have the poll to do that. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
Amber Honeycutt. Everybody loves whiskey. If Amber likes it, then everybody likes it.
Right? That Tyler Woods, one of the guys that was on that show, like Tyler Woods, he's from down around home, and I know a couple people. I have a couple of mutual friends with a guy. I could probably get him on.
Jonathan Coleman just got on here after we talked about him.
Of course he did. He's got ESP. He's got ESPN. He knows when he gets talked about. I put him on cloud 9 this morning. Did you see the pallet he got for his?
I did. I saw that
for
post.
A present.
I'm like,
Yeah,
damn, somebody's looking to step it up this year.
Hey, John, here's a tech question for you. Somebody wants to know if they need it. Their valve springs have been out of the box for over 90 days. Should they go ahead and replace them?
Holy shit.
Well,
listen, hold on. Before we start tonight, before we go down this too bad of this path, I just want to point out that I got this really cool email from a shop teacher last week. 2 shop teachers contacted me last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And one was like, oh, thank you guys for not cursing very much or whatever. So my shop class, we break it up into 3 segments a week, 45 minutes each, and listen to it with my shop class. So shout out to you guys, man. You young dudes listening. That dude is smart to have you kind of, a lot of the stuff is a pain in the butt that we, talk about, but some of it's actually pretty valuable. So it's good to have everybody listening. Anyway, carry on.
So does this mean I'm not supposed to use the word?
He got muted or broke up. I didn't even hear what word he was going to say.
That's hilarious.
I didn't do that.
He muted himself.
I didn't know if he stopped talking because I stepped on him.
I think he did that on purpose. Yeah. All right. No.
I was having fun. Go ahead.
Right. Carry on. I just didn't
That's
get
hilarious. I don't know. I mean, if you take the advice of the company that actually made the spring, maybe you should take them off and replace them with something else. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
I mean, if they only last 90 days, that's pretty rough.
Yeah, I know, right?
I wanted to hear more about this, actually.
Yeah, I wanted to hear more about that story too. I don't know if it was 90 days shelf life. And Brad knows the other side of that, I bet. But
yeah, well, I posted the screenshot of where it came from. So,
somebody said, one engine builder said that he gets springs that said they have a 90-day shelf life. That they're after 90 days after the sale was when the warranty stopped. Or
90 days from the day it's packaged and shipped.
And that wasn't a confusion? Well, that was no confusion there or nothing? I mean, that seems weird.
Well, I mean, it's the first I've ever heard about it. But, when
just read the Facebook chat, Amber's all over it.
Yeah.
But I like those people, by the way. I'm looking forward to that class. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know. Brad, you got thoughts on that or whatever? I mean, Brad actually worked at that shop for a while. I don't know.
I didn't actually see the post. I heard you say it. I was like, what?
That's what we heard and read. And I saw the screenshot. So I don't know. I thought about just asking the guy because he's on a couple of the engine builder forums now. But anyway, whatever.
I got some bracket guys that probably have 3 years and 1,000 runs on the 1225, 1226s.
And we all do. And I've got the same, I've got guys with the same amount of runs. But there's a reason why this gentleman was told what he was told.
Yeah.
And because they were breaking them.
Right. Because they're trying to get coming out of pocket to replace engines that failed because a spring failed.
Would they do that anyway? Would they do that anyway? I mean, we don't get that on the pro stock motors. At that level, like the elite guys, I mean, man, valve springs they check them every damn run.
But here's the thing about it. It's not that they failed from normal service cycle. Or, we're talking like minutes after startup.
Yeah.
Or 3,500 RPM on the first pull and a valve drops. like way before they should even think about it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to speak no more on it. I saw what I saw. I read what I read, and I thought it was kind of interesting that, I've got shit on my shelf that I eat that has a longer shelf life than a fucking valve spring now.
Yeah. I mean, here in the last 10 orders or so, I've had to order maybe 6-7 sets of the same part number to mix and match to get I'm not gonna say a good set, but a set with the same pressures.
Yeah. What are you using to test them? You got one of those spring dyno things like Dahlquist has or whatever? Is that, you got the same thing he's got, or is that what you use?
No, I use a Puxton, but it, I mean, when you pull on one and they're 20 pounds difference, I mean, something's kind of goofy. I mean, now the 1300 series, to be honest with you, that's supposed to be the nano finish deal. They're supposed to be a little more all in the same rate, but I've even seen a few of those. I mean, you see it with all springs, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that there was a point in time where you could get something from Pack and it was dead money. In the story.
5
pounds.
What I mean? The box will be within 5 pounds.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
Now you do good to get a box that's within 25.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's about all I have to say too.
It'd be interesting to hear from the manufacturer side what the challenges are there. If there's any manufacturer guys out there that are sitting there cussing us, I'd like to hear both sides. You can actually message me and call us. I mean, screw it. Sorry.
Yeah, like Tom said. Yeah, like Tom said. Tom just posted on Facebook. He said they all coil bind at different heights too. And that's a quality control issue.
Wait, Brad,
because that means the damn wire is a different diameter.
What, Brad? What were you going to say? That's worse when they coil bind differently.
Well, yeah, especially if you're trying to run at 50 thousandths or something. Yeah, y'all realize I'm not a valve train guy. I think everybody here pretty much knows that. All right, cool. I can talk. Don't get me wrong. Most of us will put the retainer to the right valve and check every one of them. You know what I mean? But when you read in there that they want it 50 thousandths from bind, or and if you got 20 thousandths different in bind from spring to spring, and that one might be 30 or one might be 80.
It's hard to get quality these days.
So what do? Just put them all in at 100 and cross your fingers? So that's just not right.
Guys, would it make sense to back up a little bit and explain for a lot of the audience what we're talking about with, where we're trying to set springs to coil bind and why, and what those dimensions typically are, maybe what varies, in terms of types of engines, because we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and maybe not everybody is with us.
You had like 14 people log in just during Booley's rant. Go ahead. Somebody. It's that awkward silence.
in the old days, it wasn't uncommon to set them at 100 to 150. You know what I mean? And now if you take some of the newer springs and the newer wire and do that, they're dead. They're done. I mean, you'll be lucky to get, X amount of runs out of them. So you want them next to, because you got surge, there's a whole lot of things going on in a valve spring. I mean, there's some funky videos out there. You can just see what's, they're dancing all around.
When you say set them at 150, what do you mean? So our listeners
bind clearance. So total lift, where they bind minus total lift.
What is when they're bind? I'm a dumbass.
And the thing too is, a lot of guys, they'll take their cam lobe times their rocker ratio minus their lift, and there's you got some deflection. I've seen some rockers that have been 70 off from net lift. They may be a 1.7 rocker and they're tracing more like a 1.6 rocker. So you don't know all that, and that's probably, in all honesty, what saves a lot of people if you think about it. Just maybe I'm going to call it dumb luck. But all the really high end stuff. I've had some stuff leave here that have been 40 to bind. So everything gets checked. Absolutely everything.
So when we talk about coil bind, what we're talking about, that's the point at which the valve spring becomes a solid stack. That's the height at which it does that. And the common thought process on this is you want 50 to 70 thousandths roughly from that height when the cam lobe and the engine is running at over the nose at maximum lift.
Tom Viguse posted on Facebook there. He said, you set close to coil bind only to calm the spring down.
Right. Because it reduces surge. It uses the full range of motion.
I agree.
Oh yeah, and a third and a fourth. And
Tom,
I listened to
with him on.
Yeah, I wasn't here for last week's episode, but I just listened to it a couple of days ago, and tons of info on that one. That was really good.
Right.
Preston actually asking, so can the pressures be corrected with the shims as long as you don't go into coil bind?
Yes, as long as you're not excessively close. If you're 120 off, I mean, that's something that we do pretty common in the hydraulic roller world, where guys that are in a non-critical application when it comes to the springs, like just say your street car that makes 400 horse to the tire with the LS3, you're 120, 130 off with a set of BTR Platinum springs. And if you run those for like a year or two and they drop 25 pounds and you notice that you're losing a little bit of performance, you can, instead of buying a fresh set of springs, you can literally go back with a 60 shim, slide a 60 shim underneath all of the springs, or a 30 shim, or whatever it takes to raise your pressures up and to keep you from coil binding the spring. And then you can get that pressure back and you can run the springs for another, length of time. But it takes a little bit of tracking and taking some springs on and off and checking your pressures and finding out how quickly they fall off and lose pressure to figure out if you need to come back with some shims and run them down a little bit closer to bind to get it back.
How frequently do you guys suggest checking valve spring pressure on the motor?
Kind of just depends with me. It just depends on how serious the combination is. I mean, the hydraulic roller stuff that I do once a year, I just tell them to take them off once a year and check them, because most of the time it's 3,000 to 5,000 miles and, just a hobby guy out making passes and making hits, Of course, I don't deal with like the high end race stuff like Chad does. Chad builds, some comp stuff and Tom's dealing with, pro stock on top sportsmen on down through the ranks. The solid roller stuff that's big lift, that spring pressure is a lot more critical, and they check them a lot more often. I know a lot of guys, they'll check them every 10 runs. I know some guys check them every 2 runs.
Yeah, when we were running comp, I used to check them every run. Take a spring, put it on the bench model, and then have an LSM or some sort of on-car tester and run the valves after every run and check the spring after every run. There's some times that you put 4 springs on every run. I mean, it was crazy. Like my personal bracket engine, I've got a set of K-motions on there, and to be honest with you, on my bracket line, or not, I'm going to say my 23 degree line, I've been using the 1650. It's been the best spring I've found in a long, long time. So every time I go racing, I ride on the side of my manifold, I'll have what they test when I get home, because I'll get home and do my maintenance like I normally do and warm the car up, check the valves, and I'll pull every run of them and I'll write the pressures on it. So, the way I look at it, I figure, hey, what's a better way to find out what's the best thing to use than to do it myself? So, but I do that. I got a notebook over here to where, a head may have a certain spring on it, and, I'll service the heads every year or whatever, and I'll check them all and I'll keep a log of it, to see how the heads are holding up in certain situations, and I found some things over the years, like, a dual spring and a 2,350, 2,400 big block valve doesn't work. Put a triple on it, be done, unless you can hire Tom, something like that. But, there's a lot of little things you just pick up on, but not all springs are equal. I mean, that's the God's honest truth, Some are far better than others too,
Yeah.
So you guys are good with using an on-head spring check as kind of a, between rounds or between races or between events, as opposed to physically disassembling and put it on the bench tester.
Yeah, but you know what? I've also seen I've had some springs that have actually lost maybe 10 on the seat, but 40 open. Figure that one out. I mean, I had more than one set do that, and I'm like, what is going on here? I couldn't figure it out. I asked just about everybody I knew. Tom says no triple Chad. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. Those are bracket guys, though, Tom. You can't. They want no maintenance.
Who doesn't want no maintenance?
Yeah, no kidding.
Hey, so shifting gears here. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you guys think that the triple for a guy who's running a super comp car or some kind of bracket car where they don't want to have to do much, a triple is better than a dual?
No, I don't. No. I the Next Tech stuff's pretty good stuff. It always seems to run well, that kind of deal. But I don't know. I haven't seen too many uses, or the common sense tells you, you can take spring pressure off if you put a little lighter valve in it. But like I've seen some of the Brodex SR20 stuff come to me that they put a 2400 stainless valve in it that's almost 6 inches long, and they got a dual spring on it. It makes you. I don't know. That's a tough deal.
I have a dual spring on a 2400 titanium intake.
Yeah, there you go.
I think we're going to give Tom Vicu a heart attack. Tom, I think he might have an
That's
aneurysm.
pretty funny, but he's on like 30 or
talk.
probably about a minute delay. Just remember that. So
yeah, no, we might.
He'll get your apologies after he's cooled off.
Oh, poor Tom.
So yeah.
So Tom's head doesn't explode listening to us babble on about valve train. Shifting gears a little bit. Some of the tech questions being asked here. One of them for big power-ish street car stuff, stock bottom and stuff. John, this is probably right up your alley.
This came from James Falgo down south.
No, this is a different one. I'm going to get to that one.
Okay, my bad. His is next.
This is on Facebook. I've lost it, but I remembered what it was. 4.8, 5.3, 6.0. Which one is better for making power and why?
Oh man, it just depends. It just depends. Because you can do it all. My favorite is the 5.3 because in my experience, the piston's stronger. That's my personal favorite. If we're
a little bit more head sealing area as well with the 5.3.
You're talking about bone stock junk though, right?
Bone stock
junk.
Yeah.
Junk. We're talking straight out of General Motors factory. Because the minute you go and put an aftermarket piston in the motor, you've negated anything I'm talking about any part having an advantage over another. Because obviously, when you're designing an aftermarket part, you can make the others, you can make the bigger bore. But it's just, just imagine you've got a cylinder, it's 3.8 diameter versus a 4-inch diameter. And you have a piston crown that's a given thickness. Well, that bigger diameter is going to allow more deflection in the crown of that piston just because it's bigger. And it's, I've seen a lot of piston failures with 6.0s like that. And
I've had more luck boosting the 5.3s, just sitting here thinking about the guys that they seem to live a little bit longer, the junkyard ones. I mean, pulling them out of the trash kind of.
Right.
But
and then the 4.8 likes RPM more than the 5.3 likes it.
Hey,
so,
we're getting some good questions. Let's try. Let me take one here real quick. Let's do. So Nathan Kaler, he's signed up for one of my classes. Wiring in IGN 1A coils. Okay, so he's talking about like the Holley Smart coils, the ones you can get from DIY, the ones that come on a Mercury Marine. That their three biggest engine or three most powerful engines. They have these individual coil packs. The Holley Smart coils. You can Google them. He's asking about the sensor ground. Because those coils have 3 separate grounds per coil. People ask about this all the time. And he's asking about sensor ground. Is it necessary? Abso-freaking-lutely. It's the most important one on that whole coil. The sensor ground needs to go to the sensor ground that's provided by your ECU, not grounded to the head or the block or the chassis or even the battery negative. It needs to go to the same reference plane. And it's for the 5-volt trigger to reference 0 volts. So you want to make sure that the igniter inside the coil and the output of the ECU that you're using are referencing 0 volts together. So that's absolutely critical that goes to the sensor ground and doesn't get tied accidentally to any other block or chassis grounds or anything else, or it will pick up ignition noise and false trigger. But anyway, so that's all. Just want to knock that one out.
Yeah, and tying it to the block or tying it to the chassis, especially tying it to the chassis, all that ground noise you can get will cause that coil to fire if it gets a big enough noise, which will be very, very destructive to your engine.
Because they can fire accidentally at 90 before top dead center under 30 pounds of boost, and it's not like a distributor that protects that with phasing. So who else wants to take one?
Yeah, that James Falgo question, streetcar 1,200 horsepower. What is your preferred method of intercooling? Air to water, air to air.
Now, was he saying it was going to be driven a lot on the street? By the way, dude, shout out to James. The dude made a nice donation, paid for a couple of months of storage tonight, just out of the blue. But
Awesome, thank you.
now, anyway, so yeah, he's asking intercooler, and I thought it was more street. Just he wanted a fast street car, like
a
literally
true
drive
street car. So I don't know if true street means he's only going to do 30-mile cruise, or if it means a true legitimate street car.
True streetable, I can hop in it and drive, not like grocery store necessarily, but like built with a not crazy fast street outlaws street car.
Right.
To work a couple times a week, maybe.
Yeah.
When it's nice out.
I think air to air works best on that.
I think so too.
I agree.
I fully agree.
It's Doug. Yeah.
I mean, to get a true street car to work real good with the air to water, you have so much more stuff you have to add. You have to do a heat exchanger.
No, you don't.
I knew that was coming. I knew it was coming.
I know you don't have to, but it works better if you do.
Not on the turbo car.
Yeah, I just turned mine off.
Water is.
I know the turbo will cool it back off just cruising down the road. But if you're like one of these crazy whack jobs that goes out and does 10 back-to-back highway pulls to 180,
that's where
your water's going to be effing hot. That's where the heat exchanger would help.
Well, that's where this all comes down to being application specific. But the reality of the situation is water is 14 times better at removing heat from aluminum than air is. Plain and simple. You can't argue the physics of the situation.
I get that. But I remember cruising around in Fire Chicken, and that car would keep inlet air temps driving around with its air to air that it originally had. Like the worst it would get back to back, you'd see like 160 degree inlet air temps on a 85 degree, 80 degree hot afternoon. Air to air worked good.
My opinion is that there's so many good cores and air to airs out there anymore. Why complicate it? I mean, if
the
you
simplicity
can do it with
has a lot
air,
going for it.
Make your life easy. And if you're driving a car in the street primarily, you're never going to see a high IATs because you aren't pushing the boost because you're not going to do it on the street. So yeah, just keep it simple.
It all comes down to personal preference. If you're willing to put the work in and have the additional equipment on the car that the air to water requires, the plumbing, the tubing, the pump, the tank. And, if you want it super simple where you never have to worry about it, where you're the kind of guy who just wants to jump in it, turn the key and drive, yeah, air to air is fine, but it's not better.
So I can't use a bilge pump and garden hose?
No, you cannot use a bilge pump and garden.
That's what's funny is I have that on Seabiscuit.
Pretty much, if you have an air to
Ford
water, you're not
superchargers.
having fun on the street. You're just going to the cruising and you're done.
The way James described it sounded like it would be an air to air application for me, like something that'll.
Factory Ford superchargers use air to water. It's the intercooler is an air to water intercooler. It does take a heat exchanger.
You're giving up a lot with 100 degrees of inlet air temp difference too. You're giving up as 150, maybe 200 wheel horsepower.
Yeah, those things after
chassis dynos.
A blower's a completely different situation. A blower makes boost constantly. Okay, it makes heat constantly.
Positive
displacement. Yes, even if centrifugal. If it's turning and it's making boost and it's making pressure, it's making heat. That's physics. If it's making pressure, it's making heat. That's it. You can't argue that point. If it's a blower, yes, it needs a heat exchanger if you go air to water. There's no way around that. I'm not going to say.
With ethanol, one guy's asking, Gabe Presley. I'm so not a fan
of that. It can help. Yeah, me neither.
I'm not a fan of supplement. I like supplemental fuels port style for different reasons, but I don't like I'm not too big of a fan of meth injection anymore. Too many guys, man, they ran great for 6 months, then I forgot to fill the meth tank one.
The only Jake Miller's asking what intercooler core company to go with. There's only two that make the really good ones, and that's Garrett and Bell.
Yep.
Yeah, as long as it has a Garrett core or a Bell core, you're fine. Lots of different companies use them and put their ends on, and you can get them in 9 million different sizes at this point. As long as it's made by those guys, you're probably okay.
Another thing to look at too is the added weight of all the water and the plumbing, the tanks, the pumps, and usually an air water intercooler. Once you fill it with water, it's heavier, obviously, but it's probably a marginal difference because the cores themselves are going to be similarly sized anyway. So.
Yeah, like I said, it's all about application. Each individual application requires a different answer to solve the situation.
Don't forget about each individual driver, because it makes a big difference if a guy goes and does one hit compared to a guy that does 14 hits back to back to back to back to back. You know.
Yep. You know, me personally, I personally have an air to air on my car, and you know, going out and doing a few street hits, you know, getting some tuning and stuff done. You know, back-to-back hits, you know, by the time that I've let off the throttle and I'm slowed back down, my inlet air temp is already back down to almost ambient. So, you know, it's already cool completely back off.
Really impressed. Yep.
And if just for reference, I'm using one of the ProCharger Race F-body intercoolers, which I assume is like a bell core. I'm not exactly sure on that, but it seems like it's a pretty efficient piece. But I've been pretty impressed with it, though.
Cool.
I used a CX Racing piece that was a Garrett core, and same kind of situation, back-to-back hits, just doing some tuning, and spikes at about 150, 160, and cooled right back down right away. As soon as you slow back down, within 10, 15 seconds, of back down to ambient temperatures again.
So, all right, next question. I want to kick some of these out here. Mike Head is asking. He's a buddy of ours up north of here. He's up by Dahlquist, who, by the way, Dahlquist just got out of the hospital after a 9-day stay with complications from a gallbladder removal that happened 14 years ago. Anyway, good to have you.
Just an excuse to get out of the doing the dishes.
Yeah, he's listening. He's probably listening tonight, but he did not feel like staying at the shop and being on, so he just literally got home from the hospital. So it's good to have him home. He'll be back in a week or two, whenever he feels like it. But Mike asks, hey, Scott, in your last podcast, you talked about some rev limiters retard timing as the RPMs get close to the set rev limit. Any more info on this? Mike, some systems you buy and you're stuck with what you get. Other systems come with a lot of programmability. The more engineering type systems, the Motec, Pro EFI, even the Megasquirt stuff has got really configurable rev limiters. You can do it with some other systems that are programmable, like Haltech and Holly. You can make a retard style rev limiter, but the big thing is needing coil packs, so you can really pull the timing back to like 0 degrees or even negative timing, where you still make a little bit of power. You don't beat the crap out of the motor. That's my preferred method, but it just depends on what system you're using. You just got to do homework on how configurable the limiters are, or if there's some programmable way around it. Anybody disagree?
No, I agree. You just have to watch on certain applications that still make enough engine RPM momentum, I guess you could say.
Oh, yeah.
Even with the timing retarded like that. So, most of them have, multiple set points, a hard limit. Yeah.
Cut, yeah.
So I'll usually set, a hard code limit, up above 200 or 300 RPM above the limit that I'm desiring. That way it's, it keeps it from a full runaway position. But
here we go. Josh Kimbrough, on a new combo, is it okay to take the car to the dyno and run low boost or wastegate to learn where peak torque and timing and fuel, or go to the track, and why? Josh, on your combo, if you went to a load bearing dyno, he's in St. Louis, find one of the local load bearing dynos down there. There's a couple of them. That's probably worth tuning the car on low boost and timing to figure stuff out. But if it's just an inertial dyno, pass and go to the track. Your car already, I know his combo well enough that we've got a base tune that will work pretty good for it. But,
when you add boost, though, those peak points will move.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you're testing on what you're going to run, you're throwing money away.
It's a converter car too. If we'd go there, I'd use it as an opportunity to get the air fuel right under different loads and boosts. And get an eyeball on the timing where it wants to go, and then.
Well, yeah, you want to get your tune-up worked in a little bit to make sure the motor's not going to eat itself.
Yeah,
but you're not going to be doing any significantly important data gathering until you're at the boost the car's going to run. The RPM points of peak torque, peak horsepower, where you need to shift it, all that stuff's going to change as you add boost to the car. And you get it up to where it's actually going to be.
It'll also change once you get a real world load of the track.
Right.
Yeah.
So once you get to the track and you've got real world load, which a dyno can come close to, but none of them are exactly right.
If you're a tuner or you have a close idea on where the timing needs to be, like when I go with Bill to the track or whatever, he kind of knows where it needs to be, so we don't take his combos to the dyno unless he does significant changes each year. But so we're killing two birds with one stone on the Mixler chat. Supercar says, is a dyno necessary for tuning? How do I know how much timing is enough? Completely new engine, homemade head castings,
read your plugs,
etc. Wow. Probably
this is really, if it's a new complete combo and the particular tuner isn't I guess well vetted in that particular style of combination to know like what kind of acceleration ramps and stuff you want on the dyno. Me personally, I've got track data from various horsepower cars that
there's like 9 of us on here that could tune an LS based combo just about anything you'd bring them in their sleep without needing to go to dyno necessarily. But if you brought me a weird, like the Buick Straight 8 from 1950 with a 1071 blower hanging off the side of it. You laugh. It's been done. I've done it. I've also done turbocharged flathead Fords. Yeah,
I want to see a 1071.
When you don't know what it's going to do, you literally start with a dumb number like 5 degrees, 10 degrees, and sneak into it. Play with it at idle is what I do. Come to my class. I'll show you how to do it. Anyway. Let's see. What else? Okay. Any comment on grounding both of the IGN 1A cylinder head ground and battery ground both to the cylinder head? I do have a gripe with that. Ground the cylinder head one to the cylinder head. That's important. Take the other one somewhere off to chassis or the block farther away. Just get it away from the cylinder head ground. You don't want to go to the same place. They don't want you to. Otherwise, they would be on the same wire.
But also keep it away from the electronics and that sort of thing. I've had good luck by doing it that way. So the ones to the cylinder head and then the chassis ground still stay in the engine compartment, down away from all the electronics, and things stay clean. That's just me.
The benefit of taking it to the battery is that the battery acts as a great little capacitor. It's great at soaking up noise, and that's the whole point of why they want you to go to the battery itself. It's the battery does wonders for solving all kinds of problems if you can get to it.
You got a couple of good ones here that actually came in side by side. Daryl Yost and Jason Carter. I think you can kind of tie these in together. Daryl Yost wants to know what kind of compression would be best for a drag week car. He'd run it on M5 methanol, no intercooler, 25 pounds, F2 Pro Charger at the track, and then obviously pump gas on the street between tracks. I would say, I don't know if drag week changed the rules on methanol, but unless you're planning on running unlimited, you can't run methanol in the other classes, but if you are, then go for it. But that also kind of ties into Jason Carter's question. Scott, have you ever done anything with dual fuel systems in your classes? He's doing a 16 injector running ethanol and methanol.
Yep. A lot of us here have, but it's really popular with the drag week guys. Who was the first? John Stevenson?
Pump gas likes to kind of be around like 11 and a half at the high point. Beyond that, you're really pushing it with pump gas. So if you're going to drive it from track to track on pump gas, you want to probably keep it down in that 11-to-1 range or a little bit less.
I mean, if
to
you're
play
driving
it safe.
wide open throttle, I mean, when you're cruising around on pump gas, you can clean it out nice.
Cruising around, you can probably get away with. I've gotten away with 12.5, 13 in guys' cars on pump gas as long as they're not hammering on it.
Sure.
Just all it takes is one slip of the foot and one, we should race this guy, and all of a sudden you got problems.
Yeah. My only problem with that is he's using an F2. Not exactly the most efficient wheel design for that blower that exists. So the IATs.
We know that. That's crazy.
Well,
I'm so far behind.
It is what it is.
No,
the F2, I wouldn't make that motor more than 10-to-1 personally, because it's non-intercooled, even on methanol. Just because I would want a little bit wider window, because I know the IATs on that are going to be ridiculous.
So monitor your inlet air temps. That's really the lesson here. Look at your inlet air temps and keep an eye on them and decide what's good or bad. But no, wait, hold on. We didn't finish the dual fuels. So this guy was asking about those. I do talk about those in the class, yes. And just a quick synopsis, there's a couple of different ways to do it. Some guys do it where they'll have a small cell with methanol or C16 and then pump gas in a main tank and 2 sets of injectors. Some of them will supplement the fuel. Some of them will completely switch over. Some of them do things like have valves at the back, dual gate valves where they can change the feed and return from tank to tank. Kind of neat. Jeff McConnell does that like a I don't want to say a poor man's method, but that's what it is. It's a cheap way of doing it with same
That's what I do the same thing on my car.
But So anyway, yeah, lots of different ways to do it. The key thing is there to have an ECU, a standalone ECU that lets you do what you want. So that's the popular ones right now. They're easy to do staging with. Haltech, Holley. I really like how the Megasquirt guys, if you've got good hardware, their injector staging is still kind of my favorite because it's kind of a super simple thing. But you make sure you have a programmable ECU that supports what you want to do, blending, staging 2 sets, running off of 2 separate fuel tables is kind of a neat way of doing it. The old Megasquirt way of doing it was running off of 2 separate VE tables, and you literally just zeroed out where you didn't want any fuel. Now they let you kind of calculate the total fuel mass, and it you basically tell it what percentage you want to blend between the 2 sets of fuels, and it makes it so that the transition is so smooth. I've saw guys doing that on Haltech, something really similar. Holley was a little bit simpler, but you could very easily programmable tables make that work the same way. So anyway, get a programmable ECU. I'll talk too much.
Scott, how many of those ECUs allow you to do just a switch on the dash to change from fuel?
Pretty much all of them now. Pretty much all of them. Yep. All the ones I just listed.
My favorite thing.
My homemade Megasquirt used to do that and be the only one for the longest time. For like 10 years, but no one else was doing that except like Motec and other really high-end ones. Now everybody's doing it. But
the V4 Holley is really easy with dual fuel setups because with the V4 version, they allowed you to shut the primaries completely off. And Carter, I'm going to tell you, man, this is just knowing what you're doing. I think you're wasting money setting the motor up to run E85 as your primary fuel. I honestly think you just need to run pump gas as your primary fuel.
Yeah.
And then just move your blend point down. Quit trying to run 15 or 18 on the E. Make it pump gas and then move your blend point down to like 5. That way you save your money. You save your money on your injector sizing, your pump sizing, and everything on your primary fuel side.
Mm.
When you do it, I mean, because when you're doing that situation, there's no reason not to. You know, it might require you to run a little bit bigger tank on the methanol because you're going to be on the secondary fuel side a little bit more than you would be if you did it with E85. But I think it's easier that way. I mean, there's a couple of guys that are over 2,200 to the tire with a big block running dual fuel, and they're running like 60-pound gas injectors and 93 octane pump fuel for the primary. And they just switched to methanol at like 5 pounds. Non-intercooled, twin 85s, twin 88s.
So a couple of other... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, that saves you a big chunk of money because it takes a lot of pump to run 20 pounds of boost on your engine trying to run E. And then you could just save that money, get the bigger, get the methanol stuff and not have to worry about it if you'll just blend it at an earlier point in the boost curve.
Yeah, so there's 2 things that bear on that. One is the alcohol only in unlimited is highly likely to stay that way in the new rule set. I've been having some conversations with them about the rules and stuff, so there's been a little feedback going on after the initial submission. So if someone's planning to run methanol or M1 or what have you in something other than unlimited, I'd rethink that. The other thing is that this year, 2018, is an East Coast, and the availability E85 is going to be much less than it is when it's been, the Midwestern routes. So 2 things to bear in mind.
Yeah, all you guys are considering it. I live out here in North Carolina, and I have to drive an hour to an hour and a half to get E85 anywhere.
Right, and that's another tick mark for using just regular good old 93 octane that you can get anywhere for your primary fuel. Because let's be honest about it. A 427 on 5 or 6 pounds with some 80-pound injectors, it'll be real easy to get a fuel pump that'll support that. And that, you may not be able to be a hero on the ride home, but you can at least be able to drive the car and get it home.
That's where flex fuel comes in.
Right, it does. But, if you're going to blend it, you've already got all that figured out with the methanol. I'm just saying, like, if you ran out of methanol or something and if he gets stuck he gets stuck somewhere and he can't get E85.
Yeah, that's the only reason I have a flex fuel sensor on my car. Yep. That's the only reason I have a flex fuel sensor on the car is if I can't get E85 and I have to drive it on pump gas. That's why the flex sensor's there. But I literally just shut the boost controller off and cruise.
See, I'm actually curious. The original flex fuel sensors were actually designed to run on methanol, like in some of the 90s Ford stuff. So, because most people don't know this, but flex fuel sensors read for the absence of gasoline. So it'll, technically, it should read anything that's not gasoline. So in theory, the new ones should read methanol. I don't know if they do. Have any of you guys actually tried that?
I have, and we do this on one of my buddy's trucks, and we found that it reads like it's 120% when you're on methanol, even though technically that shouldn't be possible with their recommended 0 to
right.
Yeah.
Well, I believe the Continental sensors go into a fault mode, which defaults to the 120 percent, which is something like 170 hertz on the output. So,
they tell you whatever the range is to be for 0 to 100%, and then basically above that, it goes up to the 120. And
see, I read something about when you run methanol, it goes to 200 hertz.
It's something up there. I've got one sitting here on a bench, but I don't have any methanol I could pour in it. But it does go into some sort of fault mode, and OEMs did that to kind of detect bad fuel, and it trips a flex fuel sensor code in a factory ECU whenever it sends that signal back to the ECU. So a lot of the standalone guys are picking up on that and actually using it as a alternate fuel source switch.
Right.
That if the flex fuel sensor reads above 160 hertz, to default to methanol as the fuel source. So
it's really curious. I wonder if I can get a hold of one of the older flex fuel sensors that was designed for methanol. It'd be interesting.
Go junkyard hunting.
Yes, sir. I think it was like a Ford Taurus or something really weird.
It's those big brick looking ones, isn't it?
One of those cars that was an SHO.
Yes, sir. It was an SHO.
Hey, okay. What's our opinion of VVT motors in general? You guys don't talk about them much. My first answer. Generally, guys in our crowd or our listenership and customer base are putting bigger cams in them, and VVT kind of goes to crap as soon as you get past stock valve spring pressures. As the springs have more leverage against the valve train parts, the phasers have less leverage against them, and so you end up with really weird behaviors. And usually, in a lot of cases, you're better off just locking out the VVT. That's what most of these guys do. Andy Whittle from St. Louis asked that. Buddy.
Yep, I've actually got quite a bit of experience on the LS stuff with the VVT. Obviously, 4-cam stuff is going to be different because you can alter the actual overlap, but on a single cam engine, it's pretty much useless. Once you get up over, the 230s duration at 50 thousandths, the VVT cam stuff that we've tuned, most of them being like the LS3, L99 combinations, they're only going to want somewhere between 2 to 4 degrees retard above 5,500 RPM anyway. So you go on and shove another 3 or 4 degrees of duration in the camshaft, and it negates the need of it anyway. So,
Scott, are you in a position to talk about the Engine Masters Challenge stuff?
Sure.
With some of those things?
What do you want to know?
Same question.
I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
We put an old school Camago on a old school 23 degree for Engine Master.
Yeah.
Henderson did. It was really cool. It was the one that unit that stuck off the side by the timing chain.
So I got the one working. We saw that one but 2 years before that, Tony Bischoff did an LS with VVT, and it was a bigger cam, and it was worth seemingly a repeatable 20 points or something like that. So it was worth something. Chad, did it work for you? Did you guys gain points with yours by moving the cam?
Yeah, because that thing made I'd have to look at the dyno sheet, but I was thinking it made it was a 406 and it made 600 plus foot-pounds of torque.
Yep.
It was crazy.
So,
but I'm thinking he went from if I remember right, the cam was on a 101 and he was all the way down to 88 or 90.
That year was the year that the Engine Masters that Tony Bischoff did his was the LS was the year that they had the modular motors, took first, second, and third place. And fourth place, basically the first modular motor, was that LS of Tony's. Anyway, just throwing that out there. But yeah, we did it. We made it work. I had to do stuff to the phasers to give them more leverage. I don't know. Brad might know more about that. He's friends with a lot of those guys. But anyway, yeah, I just
Aren't the mod motor guys
we just
actually
put big
using it?
cams and lock them out.
Yeah, that's usually what you do is you lock them out. But experimenting with
LS
broader power range, definitely.
Yeah, the LS motors, the phaser doesn't have enough gumption to work with any spring above stock. Because once you like, if you put a BTR dual on it with a decent cam and you try and move the phaser, the thing's bouncing back and forth. If you were to do a trace on it, it bounces back and forth 3 or 4 degrees. So, and I've never had one actually pick up power. Every time I've done a camshaft for a VVT motor, it's actually made the most power part. So it never picked anything
You're
up
talking peak
upstairs.
power there, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
even past peak on the horsepower graph, even when you're getting past, it didn't hold on. It didn't hold on any better past peak by backing the cam up.
I will say on the Gen 5, the LT1 new Gen stuff, the VVT is useless on those. If you have a dual spring or anything like that, it'll just run away because it just doesn't have the phaser. I don't know if it's because of oil pressure or if it's just a different, style or whatever phaser. But the old L99s would hold the desired cam angle 100 times better than the new Gen 5 motors do. A lot of times we just lock them out on the new ones.
I don't think the cavity in the phaser is big enough. I think the spring pressures and the drag of the springs can override the force that's being exerted on the camshaft by the phaser.
Yeah,
I just don't think the phaser is just not big enough.
Yeah, they definitely did something to the phaser because it, obviously, the stuff that I've dealt with, uses the 660 BTR spring on most of the hydraulic engines, so it's, in a nutshell, going to give you similar, rotational force on the cam sprocket as, the L99, but, they just still won't hold. So,
hey, check out this question from Nikita Kravitz on Mixler. Did you guys see that one? If you had a choice to use race gas or M1 and you only had to add 50 pounds for M1 methanol, which one would you use and why?
Depends on how much maintenance you want to do.
Well, there's more to it than that. If it's a if it's a turbo limited class,
it is 76 millimeter. Yeah,
difference depends how much back pressure room you have in the turbo. You know what I mean? Because the methanol will raise the back pressure.
No,
sometimes
it'll drop it.
No, sometimes it raises it.
I don't agree with that.
Well, me and Delgado actually got some logs, and we've compared a bunch of them back to back. One of the cars
I'm going to say it depends.
Back pressure was within 1 pound of each other at 80 pounds of boost.
If you're doing the cams the same way, but if you take and you adjust it to run the fuel like you should, I can say with a fair amount of certainty that the motor would experience less drive pressure on M1.
I don't
Typically,
know.
guys are seeing a little bit better torque out of M1 down low.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule of thumb on that one. That's me, Scott. I think there's a hard.
What intercooler?
I think we've all seen a little bit of different things, but
yeah,
I've seen a little of both.
There's probably too many variables to make a definite 100%
like
answer to that.
I'll tell you, some of those same cars spool way better on methanol, like way noticeably different. And I've got
which tells you there's more drive pressure.
Which
tells you there's more drive pressure when it spools quicker. Typically.
Yeah, that's the assumption. But
I mean, that's the assumption.
Another thing too, it opens up your ability for charge cooling. If you're having to add 50 pounds, so you can actually lose some weight, from the intercooler system if you wanted to take that off and make the weight to where you can put it in places that you can move it where you want to get the car to work better.
So you're talking about drive pressure. What do you guys typically look for? Like, what is an alarming when you're monitoring that? You look at it and go, "Yep, that's the norm," or "This is outside of the norm." What are you guys looking for when you monitor the exhaust back pressure or drive pressure?
I'll look to
pressure versus map.
Yeah, usually 1.2 to 1 compared to the intake pressure.
And that's when you're at the limit of either your turbine or your turbo.
Well, that's not the limit. That's usually where it's going to be the most efficient, somewhere in that range. Probably right about what you've seen, right, John?
1.3 is my max. After 1.3, it stops making power and it stops being efficient. If I see 1.5, I want to make a mechanical change to the combination in some way, shape, or form. I want to make adjustment in camshaft, turbocharger, something to try and bring that down.
Somebody asked a question that's related to this back pressure stuff, and he's using a Holley system. Scott, you might be able to have a cheat or a hack here for him. I hate using that, but whatever.
Fire away.
He's got a Holley Dominator. Is there a cheaper pressure transducer that he can use on the Holley other than paying?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I hate to say it, man. I have as good a luck with the super cheap pressure transducers on Amazon.com for $30, as I do with some
the
of the
eBay and Amazon sensors work great.
quote unquote SSIs. My only advice on that is not to mount them to the motor, right? They don't. A lot of pressure transducers, I guess it's the larger diaphragm ones like that, don't like being mounted.
They don't like vibration as much.
Yeah.
Hey, look for cheap quality sensors. Look up the Honeywell PX3 series. Those sensors can be had on, Mouser Electronics or DigiKey or one of those couple electronic sites, and usually you can pick them up for about $40.
Yeah, DigiKey.
Yeah, those are made for like industrial applications.
Yep.
Yeah, I really like Honeywell stuff because it's always industrial stuff, and their quality controls a lot better than Chinese stuff, obviously. So
it's probably just QC'd Chinese stuff. Maybe. Well, maybe
Probably.
not. Honeywell.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Are we posting that part number? That was very helpful.
Yeah, somebody get on that.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I'll post it up.
Yeah. Let's see.
I'll
You guys
actually
are
post a
talking,
link. How
I'm
about
paying
that?
some guy on PayPal right now.
Oh, Jesus.
No.
Look at Short getting fancy, just going straight for the link, not just the name of the sensor.
Yeah.
He fancy.
He fancy. Chief and Parker asked, what valve event helps back pressure? There's not one. There could be 1, 2, or 3 that affects it.
Yeah, there's
what
a lot
you do
of-
with the camshaft. I'd tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Well, a lot of that is what turbo you're starting out with. If it's way too small, there is nothing going to fix it.
No. I mean, everything's you've got to start with a balanced application first for the cam timing to even come into play and be able to affect that situation at all to begin with. There's a big difference in what you do if you've got a Pro Mod 88 on a 427-inch motor versus a 88 millimeter S400 on a 427.
Awkward silence.
No,
Always.
So I just scored a rare set of shop manuals for my 3-cylinder 1979 diesel Yanmar 21 horse tractor, and I'm stoked. I'm PayPaling the guy right now. Sorry. That's why I wasn't paying attention.
Nerd.
Super nerd. Man, you know how hard it is? I've had that tractor like 8 years and not been able to find manuals, and this guy's just like, I don't know. He got on this Yanmar group, and he's like, and they're super weird, but anyway.
We talk about your vintage Cub Cadet.
Score. Sorry, carry on. Yeah, there's a lot of questions rolling in. Feel free to ask. I'll answer whatever I can while I PayPal this guy $70.
Let's see. Did we talk about the larger exhaust wheel to reduce back pressure?
Yes, that is when trying to reduce back pressure, turbine size is the first place you want to look to try and alleviate that problem if you're only going to make one change.
Because it's cheaper.
It is because it's the easiest thing to do.
Let's see.
Chris, 12.5 to 1 and 15 pounds of boost on 110. It kind of depends on the engine, but I know you're talking about your 1000 cc motorcycle, Chris. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really have the experience to say yes or no, but I'd
call and the little chambers on those bikes are weird.
Yeah, the pent roof, 4 valve, plug centrally located stuff like what you're dealing with, man. It's hard to say. You've got a better chance of it working than like an LS3 LS. I'll give you that much, just because the chamber's got to be slower than that thing.
It'll work. The easy answer is just to step up to a better fuel.
Yeah, add more octane. Go to a 16.
Exactly. Go to some C, go to some Q, go to some E85 or something. I've done a bunch of turbo motorcycles back in the day, and the compression was up that high with no problems.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys are slapping them, just slapping turbo systems on stock bikes, but I don't have any point of reference to what like the standard static compression ratio is on those things.
See what happens is when you get octane limited or when you're pushing something, it's not that you can't do it, it's the amount of air you have allowed in your tune. So what happens is your tuning window gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as your octane limit, kind of comes down.
Yeah, our basic consensus on that, Chris, is it could work. You need to start with less boost and work your way up, looking at your spark plugs to see how things are working, or start with more octane so you have a wider window to land in.
Yeah, so it'll be good till it's not.
Yeah. That's our general consensus is we think your starting point is a little bit more aggressive. So, either A, start with less boost, or B, start with more octane.
A lot of this talk on compression ratio, I see the static compression number thrown around a lot. And really, just from my experience, it doesn't really mean a lot because you could have a 12.5 to 1 motor with a 280 degree duration cam and it acts like it's an 8 to 1 motor,
Exactly.
So,
we're basically operating on the assumption that the camshaft would be spec'd in sync and in step with what the static compression of the motor is.
Right.
If you're 8 to 1, it's going to be 240. If you're 10 to 1, it's 260. If it's 12 to 1, it'd be like 270, 275. So
I've got a little experience with this little 4-cylinder 4-valve stuff from back when I first started doing all this stuff in the Hondas.
Good old Honda days.
You were a Honda guy.
Hey, you know what? Delgado and I were Honda guys too. It was a good platform to learn on.
Are we going down this
guys
again?
together? That's what really counts.
It's a good platform to definitely learn on for sure. But you go putting, I'm a B series guy. They didn't have all this K series stuff out back whenever I was messing with that stuff. But you stick a Civic Type R piston in a B18C, and it's got like 13 to 1 static compression. And you go putting a set of stock GSR cams in it. Yeah, you're going to have to run that thing on race gas because the dynamic compression's like, you do a compression check on the thing that pumps up 300 PSI on your compression gauge. So, something like that, you have to put a bigger cam in. So, what Bewley was talking about, camming the engine with the compression ratio, ratiomatically, is definitely key to keep your dynamic compression in a realm of functionality. So
it's so crazy to me to hear the back in my day, and then it turns into Honda talk.
Don't hate. I'm still a younger guy, so some guys back in my day would be like a 60s Pontiac or something.
That's what I'm saying. Like back in my day, we had to drive a D15 uphill in the snow, and we liked it.
You thought you were something special if you had a H22A.
You were special if you had a H22A back in like 2001.
Hey, that's considered a big block.
That's a big block.
Oh my God! It starts with the leaders start with a 2. Oh my God!
Hey, don't worry. I smashed a lot of cars with my little H22 back in the day.
Golly, the money I spent on that stuff.
I'm not going to say anything because I kind of poke fun at the Honda guys, but the reality of it is my first turbo car was a turbo 4-cylinder too. It was just a Ford.
John? Only it was a Pinto two-boat. Yeah, I mean it was worse.
It ran 12s, motherfucker, and weighed 3,800 pounds.
In the 8th?
No.
What?
In the quarter, goddammit.
Must have been downhill down in those mountains in Kentucky.
Hey, listen, damn it. Mocan is not downhill, so kiss my ass.
Would have lost to my
one way or another.
Hey,
if you're listening to this in your high school shop class, we apologize for the foul language that you just heard.
I probably got to go back and edit now that guy comes.
You're going to have to, that's going to be like 5 minutes worth of edit out. You're going to have to make him a special edit to play in the class with all the shit.
No, I'm taking notes how many minutes in.
Yeah, you're going to have to just stop talking about all this and
yeah.
And yeah, just please.
Really, he's going to edit it out because we said that Hondas were probably faster than Ford.
Nope. Dude, I got listen, man.
Well, that has to be edited.
Dude,
That's
I got
gone.
a B20Z sitting in my driveway with 350,000 miles on it. It doesn't burn or leak a drop of oil. Knock on wood. But anyway, so I ain't gonna knock on the Honda stuff. The only other thing I ever had last that long was the that Cummins diesel. I had a '98 Dodge with a NV4500. It was a short box, extended cab. Didn't have the doors. And '98, if you got the 24 valve diesel, you didn't get the second cab doors or whatever. So it was a pain in the ass to get in and out of. But I put like 370,000 miles on that. And the Dodge part of it fell completely away. We put the motor on a crate. Sold the trans to a Jeep guy and the transfer case. We basically just parted it out, but I kept the motor because it was a 53 block, so it wasn't like a really desirable first 24 valve, but it was really healthy. Anyway, sorry.
Diesels, Hondas. I think we can all agree. Anything's better than mini trucks. So.
I don't even mind.
I like some mini trucks. They're cool.
You want to ride about motorcycles?
I'm just trying to get
now.
No.
I'll take vans over mini trucks.
I'm just trying to get John fired up.
He knows I had my 2-door 2-wheel drive lowered Blazer. Shout out to Barry Cook, keeping Blazers badass.
Yeah, man. Dude, did you see Barry's article he got in? Was it Dragzine? Or which magazine was it? Or the
Dragzine.
Yeah,
I think it was.
There were a killer article on his truck, except they got the Facebook post called it a 9-second Blazer or whatever.
Yeah, they shorted him a second. It's not the first time Barry's ever been shorted in his life, but he'll be all right. Hey Barry, you wondering are you wondering what surprise I got in store for you with your motor yet?
Realize he's going to be like here that a minute from now because our delay is rather large, streaming to all three of these sites.
Yeah, I know. I just got to aggravate him.
He'll just come out of the blue with something in like a minute. Yeah, dog. You're like, what is he talking about? I forgot. I'm drinking whiskey.
I ain't drank that much. Come on, I've only took like an inch out of the top of that bottle. I'm not slurring yet. Oh, there he is. Damn you.
So. Back on the dynamic versus static compression, if you have a high static compression ratio and you cam it where it kind of drops the dynamic down low, do you still reap the benefits of having that high static compression ratio?
I don't necessarily know you can say you're reaping the benefit of it, but you have the static compression in concert with the cam timing in order, because you need the cam timing to get your RPM range, to get the motor up in its operating range where you want it to be. So you need a certain dynamic compression. Well, when you increase the cam timing, you have to increase the static to maintain the proper dynamic compression that's a combination. So those
you're basically talking pumping compression. So, there's a point where if you have too much static and not enough cam, you get into an octane limited, area. But
right.
In the grand scheme of things, you want to cam the engine for what it wants and kind of pick your compression ratios accordingly, based on the fuel you're going to use. And
just the opposite can happen. If you cam it and then you don't put enough static compression in it, then your dynamic is too low. And then you can go out and, you can basically just throw the kitchen sink at the thing and, put 25, 26 degrees of timing and 40 pounds of boost at it. Those are not actual
300
numbers.
horsepower.
Yeah,
right. And you're still not getting a timing mark on the ground strap of a 6 heat range plug.
A prime example of that would be like a 4.8 liter with a 317 head and one of John's stage 4 cams with like a 100 millimeter turbo or something.
I still don't know how that car did any good.
It's going to be a lazy dog, but that car didn't have all that. That car ended up being a 5.3. He took the motor apart and saw the crank was actually a 5.3 crank. So that was a 5.3 motor.
Oh,
had that
good.
stage 4 cam in it. So
that's better anyway.
Yeah.
At least the dynamic compression was a little up from where we thought it was going to be.
Right.
But it's just like I said, it's all about balance. I've said that for a long, long time, and that's one of my keywords that I always use. And, it's all about building something that's balanced. Everything has to work in concert with everything else. If you've got one aspect of it out of balance, excuse me, then, it's the combination's not going to live up to its potential. Everything has to be on the same page.
Can you talk about turbo spool time versus valve overlap?
Yeah, you can use overlap in the camshaft to improve spool time and to improve the energy, put to the turbine. But then you have to play the balance game again and make sure you don't overcam it, because if you overdo it to try and get spool response, then you end up reaching the choke point of the turbine too soon, and you end up finding a hard limit at the upper end of the RPM range.
Yep, so that's a very good balancing act.
It's a very thin wire that you walk trying to balance that.
So cam, converter, and turbo all have to be in harmony.
And you can't. Somebody just asked, can a cam help with an undersized converter? Not really. You can have a really big cam, but if it doesn't make anything down low to get you moving because you have an oversized cam, then that converter isn't going to like you no matter what. Just doesn't happen. The converter wants power to be loosened up to get you moving.
I mean, if you've got a converter that's too tight, you can you can adjust the camshaft and adjust the valve events to try and bring the engine and bring the power in sooner to get the converter to flash. Yes,
make more torque.
Sure, you can
make more torque.
You can make the cam do something down low, but you can't do it the other way. If you have too tight of a converter, you can't fix too tight of a converter.
In my opinion,
the cam to put it in the right power range.
Right.
Yeah. In my opinion, I'd be pulling a converter out, sending it off, and having it chopped. Give the platform what it wants cam wise, and if the converter don't work, make the converter work.
Yeah, that's changing the cam to make a bad converter work is a horrible band-aid.
Yes, it is. But it's also about, like, it's a balancing act, and it all comes down to application of the vehicle, because you don't cam it. You're not going to put a cam in a 7,000-pound truck that you want to tow with that you would put in a 3,000-pound car to turn 7,500 RPM. So it's all about the application. If you have the right cam in the engine to turn the RPM that the turbo wants to make the horsepower that you want to make, and you have the incorrect converter in it, no, don't adjust the camshaft to make the converter work better. You adjust the converter to work with the engine. But, making it smaller to make the converter work better is not the good way to approach that.
Opinion on LS firing order on SBC and BBC. We love it, but your cam gets expensive a lot of times. It's a good balance. It just gets real expensive because it's not something.
That's a good question, because I see a lot of marine big blocks are on the LS firing order. Yeah. At least a lot of the ones that I tune for are.
Yeah.
So
it's like a $1,200 cam core on a big block.
Oh wow! Didn't know that.
What's the benefit there?
The bearings look better because it adjusts the
way
firing
better.
order.
It's way more balanced.
You don't beat the number 2 main out of the motor, because the number 2 main on a standard firing order it gets a power pulse on the 2 cylinders on each side of the main, one right after another. When you adjust the firing order, you move that second firing order to a different main, and then you come back to the number 2.
You also shift the heat around the engine because you don't have 2 cylinders side by side firing on each other, so you don't have that heat pocket that happens right in between. I think it's the 4.7 swap that does that fixes the heat, moves it, which is why the 4.7 swap is so popular as well.
85% of the improvement from changing the firing order can be utilized with just a 4.7 swap. The 2-3, the additional swap of switching the 2 and the 3 in the firing order, is not as critical as swapping 4 and 7. So you don't necessarily have to go all the way to a C firing order. You can stop at a B and run the 4.7 swap and see the majority of the benefit that you would if you went all the way to running an LS firing order. And you don't have this, and not have
trying to buy a cam core.
Right, because the 4.7 swap cores are the same price as the standard firing order cores from my suppliers anyway. So,
and they tend to be on the
What
shelf
about-
as well, where
what about
the C firing order often is not on the shelf.
What about the theory of changing the headers around for any change in the firing order? You subscribe to that?
I haven't tested it. I can't speak to it. I don't know. You probably know more about that
If you're
than we do.
building equal length, then absolutely. If you move things around to get the tuning of the pulses correct, it will absolutely help. Anything you can do to get the pulses to pull each other out of the engine more accurately at the right time will always make more power.
Yeah. So when someone calls and says, "Oh, I got to have an LS swap or I got to have a 4.7 swap," the first thing should be is, "Are you willing to change your headers?"
If they're willing, if they want 100% of the changeover, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're still going to benefit from the cam swap no matter what, but you'll get more if you have headers built to match it.
I don't even necessarily prescribe to doing the swap as a power improvement. You can find 12 to it's just easier on the bearings. So even if you don't bother to change the headers, you'll still get a benefit from the longevity of your parts by doing the firing order swap.
You think it sounds any different?
I don't know.
Yes, it does. Audibly, yes, it's a different tone.
Yeah, somebody on Facebook just said they sound amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been so long since I've heard a Big Brock run. I couldn't even. I don't have any frame of reference to remember ever hearing the two different cams like at the same time to make a comparison. So I can't say if they sound different or not.
Yeah, I think sometimes though when people call and they want a camshaft, and you start talking down that road and they're like, "Huh? Really?" I'm like, yeah, that, like you said, the benefit of it by pulling pulses out. I don't think a lot of guys take that into consideration, or it's even a thought to them. But you're right.
Yeah, and it's not the end of the world if you don't.
science is about how you place the tubes going into the collector.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you put them
back.
Firing order.
Do you put them one right after another? Do you put them, where one,
I think in the grand scheme of things, once the thing is lit, does it really matter?
Exactly.
Probably not, but I bet you it sounds badass.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine
Where would
used to do some real high-end pour stuff, and he was messing with that stuff, and it seemed like it worked better in a rotation.
But wouldn't, and then wastegate placement, that would have an effect on that too. That I feel like that would almost negate.
It's just on the house. It's just on the housing.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say, are we going to have 8 wastegates on the thing or what?
It's getting a 60 millimeter just stuck on the housing.
It look like a big radial motor.
Right.
That's what it looks like. You got like this 8-into-1 collector just feeding into the thing, and like literally the entry into the housing is the first place in the whole system. Well, besides the cone and the collector, that all 8 pulses can be vented from one common spot.
Yep.
We're back. Everybody's happy now.
Man,
I love this.
So the comments on Facebook are good.
Yeah, Windows update. Just a warning popped up saying you need to do this Windows update. And it was downloading happily, and just the warning popping up killed the audio, killed the sound card. I had to stop and start all the applications. Anyway, sorry.
Well, back to the turbo sizing on a manual. I was talking about that S491 on mine spooling real fast. I mean, as fast as that thing spools and as much exhaust energy is coming out the back of that thing, I mean, I swear I could probably put a freaking Precision 118 with a G-trim turbine wheel in it and it would still spool within a couple seconds.
Well, see, the great thing.
But how would that thing be in between the shifts, though?
It probably wouldn't recover very well.
Well, that's the thing. Let me give you a little bit of insight on that. Anti-lag between shifts is key. I actually see a boost loft whenever I go into the next gear from the turbo's inertia. So like, on the 1-2 shift, say I'm 15 pounds of boost at the top of first gear. Well, whenever I smack second in 0.2 of a second, it'll actually loft up to like 23 pounds, because of the inertia of the turbo wheel still spinning, as well as the backfire between the shift where it cut ignition timing for the anti-lag.
We've got to get a speed. We need to get a speed sensor on your car. I want a shaft speed sensor on that, because I bet you get I bet you get a shaft speed spike when you do the shift when the blow off valve pops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you get, not only are you getting the shaft speed increase from the blow off valve venting and basically allowing the turbo to freewheel, you're also anti-lagging it, which that's putting
if you think
the turbine too.
If you think about it too, it takes X amount of shaft speed at 7,500 RPMs to achieve X amount of boost. Well, as soon as you smack the next gear and the RPM drops, it doesn't take that same shaft speed at 5,000 RPM to maintain that same boost level.
Probably needs more.
Agreed, but you're also forgetting that you are running a properly sized turbo. He's talking in something that's oversized, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
If you're oversized, you'll see an issue. But that, you know, the great thing with like stick cars is, you know, you can adjust launch RPM, 2-step RPM, anti-lag. And then, you know, my favorite tuning tool is housings. You know, I'm a very, very big proponent and a very big fan of big wheels and tight housings, which those have a tendency to spool a little bit better than people who do average size wheels and the largest housing that's available for the turbocharger. So
another thing to consider on that too, I will say recovery. Like if you do miss a shift and you're actually off the throttle and pedal the car, yes, I can definitely tell you for sure that it's going to be, you know, laggy getting back into boost. But I mean, if you're on the throttle and flat foot shifting the thing and, you know, your shift times aren't more than a couple tenths of a second, that shaft speed doesn't have enough time to slow down.
Is this best measured by shaft speed or by acceleration in G's?
Well, you could be looking at both of them just to see what's going on. But if you're just wondering about what the turbo's doing with, you know, how the boost and the anti-lag and the blow-off valve are all affecting it, then it would be, you would want to see, you know, actual shaft speed of the turbocharger. But that the G data, the acceleration data would definitely add just another dimension to what you're looking at and what you know.
Insert awkward silence.
Johnny.
So Courtney Green has posted several things on the Facebook talking about stick car, quote, transient response and some other elements. I don't know if you guys are seeing that, but how does that play into how you tune around managing the shift points?
Anyone?
Sorry, I'm the stick guy. I can't answer that.
That'd be a James question almost exclusively tonight.
I mean, I really don't. What does he mean by transient response? Is he talking about like how you're just on and off the throttle and how it transitions into boost, or
how quickly it spools back up and loads everything back up? There's a whole bunch of factors there.
I'm also thinking about the chassis unloading depending upon how long the shift is, but maybe he'll repost and clarify the question.
Well, no, he wasn't asking a question. He was making a statement that stick cars transient response is very important. Courtney's actually a Honda guy too. He was going bottom nines, high eights 15 years ago in front wheel drive stick shift stuff.
High five.
Yeah.
Shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's the reason why I kind of, you know, that transient response, you know, that's pretty important.
It's important.
Yeah.
Can we define that for everybody who's listening when we say transient response?
Acceleration rate, the rate at which something recovers.
Yeah, basically
what he's talking about
shut,
is wants to kill off the boost, blow off valve opens up, but you've lost, you know, your pressure build on one side to slow it down and loss of drive pressure on the other. They're talking about when it gets back and spooled up. It's a turbo thing.
As soon as you shut that throttle blade, your turbo's done. At least mine is. You know, it doesn't get back into boost unless you're like at 6,000 plus RPM, which, you know, on a Honda that's low RPM, but on, you know, something like mine that's like right up in the peak power, you know, on a LS. So it all depends. You know, in my particular car, we don't really have the best gear ratios in a T56, so, you know, its recovery is terrible if you're in a dead spot. So the transient response is definitely key. We've got a little 5.3 twin turbo car, super simple setup. It's a stick shift car. It's literally a stock bottom end 5.3 with a couple twin S366s on it. And I'll tell you what, that thing is a blast, just because, like, if you're even anywhere close to over 25-30% throttle, you know, that thing is really starting to make some steam. So, you know, that car is a lot easier to drive at the track and recovers a lot better than something with an oversized turbo. So
is the flat shift programming and some of the ECUs effective for this, or is that only for NA stuff?
Extremely.
Yes.
Hugely.
Yes, extremely effective. You know, without that feature, you know, if you shift fast enough, it doesn't matter either way. But in my case, it's helped a lot because, if you're trying to pedal the car, drive the car, and shift the car, first gear is hairy sometimes. And, a lot of times you're up in the limiter or short shifted, or you slow shift it because you're trying to get the car settled back down or something. So that flat foot shift, you stab the clutch in and it enriches the fuel and cuts random cylinders, retards the timing. And basically it creates a big humongous exhaust backfire. As soon as you dump the clutch, it ignites and your turbo's lit. So that functionality helps a lot. So
it sounds a little bit like spark cut might be a bad idea in that if you have that selectable.
Yes and no. The reason spark cut actually helps is because it lets the fuel build up in the exhaust. That way, whenever it does reignite, when you dump or let back out of the clutch, it reignites that enriched mixture in the exhaust and creates basically combustion in the exhaust. It's hard on V-band gaskets and header gaskets and turbo gaskets. It's hard on all that stuff, but that's part of the game, I guess.
Same difference as standing on the two-step on the trans brake. You're just throwing extra fuel into the exhaust and it's lighting off and banging and popping. That's the same thing.
Yeah, you're just starting the combustion process a little later.
There's different rev limiter methods for different ECUs too. Some of them will have like a retard that pulls back enough that it lights it in the exhaust or on its way out.
Yeah.
Some of them just cut. Some of them retard up to a point, and then when they overshoot, they cut. That's how I like to set them up. But
like I've got it all on mine. Like I've got an Elite 2500T on mine, and going down track, obviously getting up into the rev limiter will start retarding timing prior to it.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And on the clutch stab, it'll actually shut the coil packs completely off, so it kills all engine torque. And the reason I do that is because it's almost like a strain gauge on your shift knob, like a lot of the Honda guys use.
Yep. A lot of bike guys shift that way too. The ones that don't allow automatic shifter, you just put pressure on the, on the linkage or whatever, and then as soon as it bumps into the limiter, shuts off, it slacks up, and it pulls into the next gear.
Yeah, man, it helps tremendously too, because T56s are naturally notchy anyway, so you kill all that engine torque instantaneously. It's almost like an air shifter. It almost lets it just fall into gear. So that's the reason I have mine cut spark completely on the clutch push. That way I can easier get it in gear. But anyway, at any rate, there's a bunch of different ways to skin a cat. It's just figuring out what your combination likes
and giving yourself more options going in so that you've got something you can do with it.
Yep.
A good programmable ECU and the modern
Hey, Scott, John Huber's on. And don't they know something about managing that?
Huber, what's up? Well, they did a lot of stick cars, a lot of street stick cars that we tuned up that way. But they're full drag glide now, and they're 178 cubic inch 4-cylinder 2-valve turbo motor that runs 860s, pretty steady now. In a full weight, small tire box body. That's a pig because it's all an interior and everything real nice.
Show car.
Yeah, show car. That's only got, it's probably got, let's see. He certainly has 13,000 miles worth of drag week over the years on that car of highway abuse. In a car that runs 8, the 4-cylinder. Carry on.
Hey, sizing your hot side. What's the is there a general rule of thumb, or is there some kind of math or a formula that you guys kind of look for when you're plumbing, when you're trying to pick the diameter of your tubing to go into the turbo?
There's very few small blocks on the face of the planet that will benefit from anything bigger than 2.5 inch on the crossover and 1 3/4 on the header.
Unless it's the big bore space small block.
Unless it's something like, unless it's something like that 4.6. What's his name? What's the guy that had the twin turbo car that went 370s or something? From Missouri. Damn it. Can't think of his name.
Damn it.
But
Make more whiskey.
Yeah.
So keeping the hot side small keeps the exhaust energy and velocity up, so it hits the turbo harder. And when you go to a larger diameter tube, you have more volume of air, and it basically becomes a giant. It's like
lets more heat out too.
You have to fill that area up. It's like a bigger balloon to fill before it starts to put pressure on something.
Right.
I generally use a rule of thumb. If you're under 1,500 horsepower, use 2.5 or smaller. If you're trying to shoot for 2,000 horsepower or something crazy, 3-inch ain't gonna hurt you.
Marty Stinnett. Thank you, Mr. Joe Lightcut.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
His 480-inch big bore space deal. Yeah, I can see 1 7/8 and 3-inch working for him, but the average street driven sub 1,500 horsepower. I mean, I use 2 1/4. I've had guys make 1,300 wheel on 2 1/4.
I think that's what's in my car right now is just 2 1/4.
Yeah,
that's what I got too.
If it makes for a great driving combination because it's less volume that you have to raise, because obviously the pressure in the whole system has to come up. So you've got less volume to fill to get the pressure up quick, and you've got a smaller cross-sectional area that'll have a higher velocity, and that'll carry more energy to the inlet of the turbine, and it'll carry more heat to the inlet of the turbine as well. But then obviously, with a smaller cross-sectional area, you reach its critical flow speed, its critical airspeed a lot higher, a lot quicker. But,
hot exhaust gas flows a lot easier than cold charged air does.
Right. And, if you've got excessive volume, that slows the speed down. And if you slow the speed down, that allows more heat to be radiated into the pipes and then into the engine bay. So, there's really no downside. I'd rather a hot side be one step too small than one step too large.
So is that scaling aspect, if you're going from, say, 300 cubic inches to 600 and the sizes you guys were talking about, is that just geometric progression in terms of area, or is it logarithmic, or what do you think in terms of sizing?
It's mathematically based. Volume, density, airspeed, just a few calculations there.
That you got to screw with a bunch of different parameters until you find out what works, basically.
Experience, putting a lot of combinations out there and seeing what does good and what doesn't. It's just an experience thing. There's a lot of guys. I mean, there's guys out there right now with street driven LS cars that can make 4 digits to the tire on a 2-inch crossover.
I'm just going to say this. If anybody hasn't looked inside a turbine housing on a turbo, a lot of those things, the outlet is about the size of a quarter.
Right.
Are there any benefits to running the primaries right to the turbine housing versus the primaries like an actual turbo header into a crossover or single pipe into the turbine housing? Does that make sense? Like what's the difference if you run like a turbo header, or run them all into one? And like
are you kind of asking like that 8-to-1 collector like we were talking about earlier?
I think that's kind of what they're getting at. Like, is there a benefit to running? So, you have sometimes you have a packaging constraints and you have to run, say, a log style manifold where you have a crossover from one bank coming around the back of the motor into just a log on the other side to feed the turbo.
Oh, gotcha.
Or versus breaking out 2 equal length side to side of each motor is equal. You know what I mean?
Me personally, I don't like running, some of these turbo kits, like especially like for the trucks and stuff. They'll have a crossover come up underneath the transmission and hook into the back side of the log on the passenger side.
Right.
And basically that log is getting 8 cylinders worth of exhaust flow through it. I don't like that because it makes about the motor unbalanced.
You'll see a lot more heat stress in the passenger side bank of the passenger side bank components than you will in the driver's side. Then there's companies out there like Trick that have a fully divided rear speed like that, and that works. The hooker one, that works. That's better than one that does. But I think this guy was talking about like literally making the headers so long you do like 2 4-into-1s and put the turbine flange right on it.
Yeah, he just posted. He's talking about putting the turbo flange right at where the header collector is, or having straight pipe coming out a little ways, and then putting the.
Oh, gotcha.
I've never done it with a single. We've tested it kind of with twins, and we literally, because in my opinion, I don't think it's a good idea to get the primaries like so long. Because, I mean, you're talking about a primary that would be 45 plus inches, maybe 50 inches to build on a single turbo setup like that.
Yeah, I feel like the pulses would do weird stuff.
The pulses kind of do weird stuff, but I've done a 4-into-2 style header and bolted the turbo right to the header and had a wastegate on each side. It took 4 wastegates to keep that under control, because if you put it on one side, it doesn't vent the other 2 cylinders on the other side of the collector very well. And it, really wasn't able to get data off of it in a manner that made it comparative to like a 4-into-1 with a short feed pipe up to the turbine. But the reality of it is a 2 1/4 or a 2.5 inch is not that much of a step down from a 4-into-1 collector for 1 3/4 inches. You got to remember, all the cylinders don't fire at the same time. So not each one is not trying to push exhaust into that 2 1/4 or 2.5 inch pipe. So I really don't think it's much of a restriction for that. I wish I had more data on a 4-into-2 deal where the primaries dumped like right into the turbine housing, because like you, I was curious about that too, but we weren't really able to get the data on it to make a definitive comparison one way or another.
I feel something about scavenging would have to help, having a little bit of pipe there so that, some of the cylinders could feed off one another versus, dumping straight into a turbine housing, because, it's not really going to scavenge once it gets into the turbine housing, I don't think.
Are you going to get a scavenging effect, though, in a pressurized system like that?
That's a good question.
It's probably more pressure tuning, right?
You will. Well, I mean, it's just like the intake manifold. You still get pressure wave tuning on the intake manifold.
So
everything just changes.
Think about it this way: it's a factor of inlet pressure over exhaust pressure. If you could keep them theoretically at 1-to-1, then you'd get the same scavenging benefit, because it's not the pressure coming in or the pressure going out; it's the comparison of the two. There's a lot of ECUs out there actually have the map over EMAP strategy, which is pretty slick. Delgado's on here harassing us. Yeah, we know there's what a BBC is, not just a big block Chevy. Chris thinks he's actually babysitting, so he can't get on the chat. But
you have to tell him to stop.
Yeah.
Hey, Vinny Barbone posted a question.
Bad influence.
No, go ahead. Vinny had a question.
On the Steve Morris LS single turbo exhaust setup, which I'm not familiar with.
I don't know.
But it brings up an interesting question about asymmetric exhaust. If you're running a single, would you run a tri-Y on the long side and a 4-into-1 on the short side? Or has anybody done anything like that?
I don't like asymmetric exhaust. I would prefer everything to be as even from one side of the engine as possible, from both sides of the engine as possible. Like in your crossover where you put the turbocharger, make the headers equal length, and then, do something in the design of the crossover where each leg of the crossover is equal length.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of cars that with a big single that puts it off in the passenger wheel well or something, that they'll actually take the, that passenger side crossover tube and actually take it back over towards the driver's side and then, bend it back around to meet back up, to kind of keep the crossover tubing from each collector to the flange similar.
It looks like an F-body Y pipe almost on some.
Phil, listen, we're going back, 4 years to LS1 Tech. Phil Thomas posted pictures of his big inch motor with like a 106 on it, and he had built his crossover. There was a 14 or 15 inch discrepancy in the leg length of his crossover, and he posted pictures of the chambers and the valves off of each cylinder head, and he was showing differences in heat signature and results of them seeing 2 different levels of heat stress on from one bank to another. And then he went back, rebuilt the crossover with equal length legs, and then like the next year posted the pictures again, and they looked way closer than they did with the previous crossover.
Like when you say heat stress, what exactly is heating up? Because there's so many turbo kits that are out there, even manufactured turbo kits that have just a ridiculously long crossover because packaging is packaging and you got to do what you got to do. But
well, I mean, when you run a turbo engine, you're going to see, the telltale signs of heat in the motor, chamber, carbon buildup in the chamber, discoloration in the aluminum, discoloration in the valves, and when I say differences in heat signature, and what I'm talking about is basically you can tell when one valve was hotter than the others repeatedly because the heat.
You can also see how they were burning.
Right, and you can see the result, of them being too hot. The distance up the stem of the valve, that it's just like spark plugs. When you've got a spark plug, you see heat signature up the thread of the body of the plug. And with different heat range plugs, the point at which that heat signature goes up the body can change. Well, it's the same thing if you know what you're looking at with the components inside the engine.
Yeah.
The pistons, the valves, the chamber, the head gasket. You can, if you can look and really look at it and take a close look, you can see what you've got going on there.
I just see a lot of stuff with the turbo stuff that a lot of people just say, get it in there. And, all too often people will just say it's a turbo car, just turn it up, add 1 more pound of boost to compensate for that. And at some point you got to stop doing that and actually design
diminishing returns for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
you won't do nothing.
Package your stuff correctly.
The reality of it is when we start talking like Phil Thomas's car, that car, very fast car. This thing is well into the 4-digit range, probably over 1,500, maybe 2,000 horsepower. So when you start, it's all a function of how much you're making, is how many details you have to pay attention. So on a 800 horsepower LS, you don't really have to worry about it. On a 16, 18, 1900 horsepower LS, yeah, you should be looking at it and trying to pay attention to it.
And it's just a difference between the type of person it is, too. Some people like to fine tune and pull every little last ounce of potential power out of a certain combo on a certain level of boost or whatever. And that kind of goes towards that. You can slap a turbo anywhere you want and
go to a class and learn to do that too yourself.
Yeah, do the sloppy mechanics and, stick weld you a crossover pipe up and, duct tape a wastegate on it, whatever, and make it work. But, at the end of the day, fine tuning
some sweet combos. Just need to tune, bro.
Don't get it right, just get it done.
John, what are LS head gaskets holding up in the higher horsepower setups or using the Australians?
LS9s?
I mean, I've had LS9 stuff hold to well into the 4-digit range, 1,300 horsepower.
I've got LS9s on mine, and it's a stock 4-bolt, stock size, stock. It's like just your standard ARP head stud deal. It does have a trick-full head on it, but I made like 1190 to the tire on 22, and I've seen 33.
Yeah, you're 1,350, 1,400 to the tire there. So
yeah,
I mean the LS9's a really, really good head gasket for what it is. It's does a damn good job.
Heck, I was doing that with the stock GM 5.3 gaskets that are $26 a piece.
Well, freaking Capizzi does it too.
Yep.
He does that too.
I think a lot of it too plays, bore size and because I know a lot of guys will still run an LS9 gasket on a 5.3.
I don't like that at all.
I don't
overlay that. There's giving up so much gasket when you do that.
Oh, I know. I don't like it either, especially on aluminum blocks. But an iron block you can get by with it because there's iron material there. But on aluminum blocks, I really don't care for it. But I've done it. But
you literally cut your gasket material in half.
Yeah.
From a 5.3 to an LS9 in between the cylinders. So
yeah, the LC9 head gasket's really nice. It seems to be pretty nice. I mean, anymore on the aluminum 5.3 stuff, we just throw LS1s on it, the $40 for the pair, and run them.
Exactly.
Billy, weren't you all working on a 7 or 9 layer 5.3 bore gasket?
I plead the fifth.
I was going to say,
but
you posted that on Facebook.
no, I am.
He's almost finished with the fifth.
No,
Nice.
I don't on that one. But yeah, I am working with something. I went to Thule because he's got his private label LS9 head gasket, and I went to him with the idea of creating that same gasket on a 3.9 bore. So we might see that this year. I hope to see that this year. I'll be very, very happy if I see that this year. So
yeah, that would fill a big void, I believe. I mean, the LS1 5.3 high output gasket is a pretty good gasket still.
But it's still only a 3-layer gasket, not a 7.
Exactly.
What do you guys do? Do you guys put them on dry? Do you copper spray them? What's your method of install those? I know there's a lot of schools of thoughts out there on it.
If you copper spray a head gasket, an MLS gasket, when you put it on, you deserve to be just
It'll never
shot
come
with
off.
You deserve to be shot with a taser.
Hey, John, Tony from 8 yes.
Put it on dry and clean.
Yeah, dry and clean. Yep.
Stuff like Hylamar is made for copper, but it's
Doug's doing the.
Doug says like, "Hey, you guys."
Sorry, Doug. It sounds like talking on single barrel malt whiskey or whatever the fuck.
I don't know what's going. I don't know what's going on there. But
sorry, Doug. That was really funny. You'll have to listen to the replay.
The MLS gaskets have a rubberized coating around the water jackets and around the oil drain backs. If you spray Hylamar or any of that stuff on top of that coating, you've created a double layer coating that can move around. And the reality of it is it doesn't really need to be there. If the surface finish is right and the head is flat and straight, just clean and dry, torque them down, and it'll be fine.
What do you do if you're doing a stud? Do any of you guys over torque, add a little extra oomph over?
No, because then you're twisting the head beyond. It's designed to clamp in a certain manner, and when you over torque it, you're changing that clamping load, and you're changing a slight warping of the head at that point. So you want to follow what they recommend. There are times to do it, but it's usually really, really old studs that have stretched a lot, and you're changing the stretch on that stud, and at that point you should replace them anyways.
I think it depends on the block and the head that you're using as well.
And the application.
Yeah, because like they did I forget, somebody did it here about a year or so ago. I saw it on my news feed where they put a pressure sensitive material underneath, in place of a head gasket and torqued it down, and to see what clamp load was basically put in what areas, between the block and the head. And in some cases, over torquing actually improved distribution of that load, but it's a case by case scenario.
And so,
going back to John's comment, I think it's probably just builder by builder preference, because there's a lot of high end builders that do copper spray MLS gaskets. So I don't think it can be summarized by what your opinion is there.
But they're doing it on MLS gaskets that don't have that rubber ring around it as well.
Yeah, they just said MLS gaskets
that are completely dry.
No, I just didn't want to mislead people and say it was all,
We were talking about GM gaskets. GM gaskets has the rubber embossing around the drain backs and around the water ports.
You just said MLS gaskets in general. Sorry.
Yeah, in the early days of the MLS, even the Cometics and stuff, we had that issue where we'd put an engine together, we'd put it on the engine dyno, and we just put the dyno water to it, and it would seep. And so we, what the hell is this? And we went back and we used copper coat or something like that. But that's been 8-9 years ago, back when we used to have to push our Hondas up the hill in the snow both ways. So now...
No, the Hondas always drove up the hills.
Yeah.
I never had any problems with that.
But now the coatings, at least on the gaskets, we're familiar with and we use, work by themselves, like everybody's been saying, completely dry, clean, decks with the correct finish on the head and the block surface, and they work great.
it's almost like they pre-coated it with your copper coat, quote unquote, spray in the certain critical areas that it needs sealant. At least on the GM stuff.
Well, in the day of the Cometics, they just embossed the outer layers. So when it crushed, it kind of sealed, but it didn't crush right. So yeah, on some of the old stuff, yeah, fine, you got to put Hylamar on it. But all the new stuff has got the embossing on it. So if it's got the little line of rubber coating around everything, I think it's counterproductive to put Hylamar over top of that.
Or on a lot of the other Cometics, they've got, and I can't remember the name of the substance on it. It's not Hylamar, but it's like that, and it coats the entire gasket, and that allows it to fill in all the little porosities and stuff. And I apologize, I cannot remember the name of that substance, but it covers the entire deck.
Hey, if I'm servicing my motor, how many times can I reuse my head gaskets?
I was getting ready to touch on that. If you're from experience, don't reuse them things. I had an engine, a little 6-liter engine, and I was pinching pennies at the time, and the motor had literally just been sitting on an engine stand. I torqued the heads down and was like, crap, I don't want to use those heads now. So I pulled them off and stuck a different set on and torqued it back down and stuck it in the car. They leaked. So don't reuse them. They're cheap enough. Just throw them in the trash and get some new ones.
Yeah,
save yourself the headache.
I will shamefully admit I have done it and gotten away with it a few times in my younger, dumber days. But I wouldn't.
Sometimes you can get away with it, like if it's the first time you're doing it and it's completely dry and no liquid has been in the block ever. You can sometimes get away with it, but I'd say 8 out of 10 times you're not going to get away with it. It's going to leak.
This is your disclaimer. Yeah. RealTuners Radio will not be held liable for you reusing your head gaskets.
We're going to be held liable for nothing.
And that's one of those times you
just say no.
Material.
I had an engine builder tell me he reused the MLS gasket 36 times.
Oh my god, that wouldn't be one I ever used again.
What did you do on the boring plate?
What was it? A 90 horsepower Honda?
The torque plate, the bore it.
It was a 21 horsepower Yanmar.
There was a question about the
Yanmar jokes.
Your head gasket on your lawnmower you can reuse over and over.
This was the same guy that put it on upside down and starved the head for oil.
Oh, yeah. He sounds like a real winner. Personally, the only time
know people that have done that. It was water. It was killing on an LS. But
look, yeah, small block Fords when you put them on the wrong side and you let the water short circuit through the front port that normally gets blocked off. That's always good for the back 2 cylinders on each side.
You guys looking at the time? We have to wrap it up here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Right. There were 2 quickie questions that came through there. One was on reuse of ARP head studs, and the other one was what is the recommended surface finish for LMS or MLS? This has been some good 12-year-old Pappy Van Winkle, so I apologize. Anyway, what was the proper surface for an MLS gasket? Now, each of the gasket makers has a recommended surface finish. If anybody can quote that here, that'd be awesome, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
I don't know.
I don't either.
I've had Cometics seep water on a buddy's car, and when we took it off and we put LS9s on it, and then we didn't change anything else. I don't know, but I do know they can be finicky.
Yeah, I can't remember what the RA is for surface finish on that stuff.
As far as how many uses on your ARP head studs, I kind of use my discretion on that. If you've torqued enough head studs, in your time, you know when one is getting not right. So if they're not torquing right, pull them out, toss them, and put you a new set in. But generally speaking, they're pretty good.
Yeah, they get squishy on the third run.
Yeah, basically, if you torque it down and it doesn't go right to that torque spec, and then you go and you check it just to double check it, and it's not at that torque spec when you double check it, then there's a problem. It's stretching. It's giving way. So
yep.
Normally when you torque them, they're going to go pretty much right to that number and stick. And then once you've torqued all of them, and you go back over everything a second time to double check, and it matches, then you're good. If all of a sudden one of them is way out of whack and all the rest still match, that one of them probably needs to go.
Yeah, eventually they'll automatically release and let you know.
Trying.
Yeah, that or you pulled the threads out of the block.
One of the things that I try and pay attention to is to how much rotation it takes to get from the first step to the second step, then the second step to the third. The first time you torque them, if you'll kind of pay attention to that and be like, oh, well, it only took like 30 degrees to get from here to here for the first step, and then it took 30 degrees to get the second step. When that number starts getting up, like the second or third time that you torque them, and then all of a sudden to get from the first step to the second step, it takes 50 degrees of rotation, and then it takes 55, 60 degrees from the second to the third. That's when you need to start really kind of wondering about how many more times you're going to use them. Somewhere between 3 and 5 times is usually where I see the ARP stuff needing to be replaced.
Yep.
And a lot of that depends.
If you call them, they'll tell you to use a stretch gauge, and they'll tell you exactly how much stretch it can have before you should get rid of them. Like, I don't ever do that. It's usually it ends up being about 3 times and they're done.
That also goes back to, the over torquing and stuff like that. If you're wanting to increase your clamp load, in my experience, it's best to just go up a better stage in ARP's, category for stud material. Your base,
AKA 6.5.
Yeah.
God, they're so expensive though.
Well, they also, a lot of people don't know this, but
buy once, cry once.
Yeah.
If you get used to the LSX block kit, were actually made out of ARP 2000 material instead of the 8740 that the standard LS head stud kit was. So now I think they've got a separate part number for it. So if you 4-bolt head guys don't have to actually spend the extra coin for the 5th and 6th head stud, but those actually do
45.
Yeah, those actually do torque a little bit higher and, have a, 20 to 30,000 PSI tensile strength increase. So
what about Gen 3 versus Gen 4, the long versus short studs? Is there...
The Gen 4 better. The Gen 4 is better.
Is it?
I always wondered that, because if you think about the long studs, they kind of go down and interlock more into the main area than, the top side of the deck. So I guess, does the block material play a role in that as well?
The issue that we found was the different link studs clamp differently.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it loads the outer 2 ends of the heads different. And I've had a couple of guys push Gen 3 stuff really, really hard, and they would lose head gaskets around the 2 shorter studs on each end of the cylinder heads. And we went back, replaced the block with a Gen 4, replaced it with Gen 4, came back with the same tune-up that was on the Gen 3, and we didn't have any head gasket problems.
Well, whenever you got guys like Capizzi out there running 770s with a stock 5.3 aluminum block, short studded motor, it makes you just think it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it just depends, because it's a whole different ball game, kind of. Because Jonathan's running a really big turbocharger, and the guys that I was having problems with were
making
running
a lot of cylinder pressure.
Well, they were running some turbo limited stuff, so the tune-ups on the motors were a lot hotter and a lot harder to try and get every ounce of power out of the combination as possible. Capizzi's got this big turbocharger where he can make the power without pushing the tune-up.
How to do it.
When and that is how to do it. But when you're working around class
right. No, I mean, for
rules,
what Jonathan's doing, he's doing exactly what he needs to be doing. Yeah.
Right. Like I said, but but when you've got a limited turbocharger and you have to push the tune-up harder, things like the head studs being different lengths can either, the difference between the motor staying together or spitting the gasket and pressurizing the cooling system.
You guys done yapping yet? Or are there any more questions? Sorry. Gonna go back and forth for like an hour.
See, we don't need no guests this week. We did just fine.
Clearly, I gotta interrupt you guys, basically, because I gotta go back and edit out all the cuss words. It's gonna take me 3 hours, and if I don't put it up right away, all these guys in Australia give me a 100.
Yeah, well, you just shut the.
Yeah. All right. Never mind. Carry on. Go as long as you want. We paid for it.
Bill,
you're such a ninny.
Bill is self-editing.
He
gets a raise. He gets a raise this week. He's self-editing.
It doesn't change my work any. So What else?
Self-edit a couple times a week.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about that. All right, that's a good segue into working our way out of here.
I'm gonna go edit myself right after this show.
Oh Lord! All right, we'll see you guys a little bit later. Stick around. All right, so it's just me. Man, what a bunch of clowns. Okay, so let's go through the classes real quick. If you check it out on RealTuners.com, there is a lot of class schedules going on here. RealTuners.com, you click on RealTuners Live Classes. Okay, so we have got RealTuners Essentials at KP Racing, Houston, Texas on the 20th. And February 3rd, we are in Melbourne, Florida. February 24th and 25th in Tick Performance, Mount Airy, North Carolina. Factory ECU, HP Tuners. This is an experimental one. James Short's going to teach this class. It's really his class. In Danville, Kentucky on April 7th and 8th. It'll be a 2-day class as well. Holly EFI only, Springfield, Missouri at Blake Hughes' shop, 417 Motorsports. That'll be a good one to come learn the Holly. April 21st and 22nd. April 28th and 29th will be back in Danville, Kentucky at James Short shop again. This is for a Real Tuners EFI Essentials. Standalone training. All makes of standalones. Another EFI Essentials coming up then May 12th and 13th at Full Throttle Speed, Michael Lick's shop, Detroit, Michigan. Then the last one we've got on the schedule so far, May 26th and 27th, will be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Endless Performance. So, check us out. I'd like to see some of you guys. People are signing up for these classes. They're already pretty busy. So, anyway, hope to see you guys soon, and thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next week. Take care.